The next thing that I'd like to do is we're going to work with that activity that you just did, and the champions the exercise. But I want you to be in groups of no more than 4 or 5 people, because, and I'll tell you why, and I'll explain it to you, and then you guys can self-organize. What this next activity is going to take a good chunk of time, because what I'd like you to do is, in a group of 4 or 5, each person, taking turns, take about 10 minutes where you explain what it was, what your goal was, or what your learning objective is, who your champion is, and just go through the exercise that you did and share that with the group as much as you feel that you want to. And then the rest of the group, once you've shared that, can ask questions, give input, make suggestions, maybe make some comments about what it is that you're doing, so that you guys are working as a group to get some of that input. And so I want groups of no more than 4 or 5, because if it's a group of 8, then it's going to take us about 80 minutes to do that, and I'd rather it take 40 or 50 minutes to do. So there's 3 people here, and so maybe we can. Oh, there's 2 more coming? Okay. So yeah, we've got an extra table here. I think there's 50 of us, if we still have everybody come back. And so I'd like to have 10 tables or 10 groups of at most 5. And so there's a table here. So if there's 6 or more at your table, somebody's got to move. So we've got a table here that has space. And if we need to, we can make another group right here. So how did you guys, let's bring it back to the whole group. How did you guys find that? That was pretty intense. You guys that was a full hour of sitting there talking about stuff. How did you find that in general? Any feedback on doing that exercise? Great. In what way?
It was very supportive.
It was supportive? Yep. What else?
That did not seem like an hour.
It didn't seem like an hour.
We all have way too much to say.
Yeah. It goes by really fast because you're engaged. Yeah, and I sat in on a few groups, and everybody was engaged, which is really great. Did you find that you had enough time? I was trying to keep you guys to like 10 minutes each, sort of thing. Was that enough time to talk about your own thing? Everybody in each person had their own goal that they were talking about. Did that matter? Did it make a difference to the process? No, it didn't, did it? And I think some feedback that I've had in the past is that maybe we should have people working on the same thing all together. And I don't think that matters, actually. And I think it's important that you get different perspectives on your goal rather than having different.
And I think at any given time, my goal would be my colleague's goal and their goal could be mine.
Right, so yeah, at any given time you've had that goal. And actually in this group over here, 2 people had the exact same goal, and they had the exact same champion.
No, not the same goal.
So not the same goal, but the same champion.
We made our goals based on our champion.
Gotcha. Did anybody get off topic? No? Nobody got off topic? Got sidetracked or anything like that?
We did it.
You did a little bit. That can happen too. So how did you get back? What brought you back? You just somebody realized it and brought you back around. Okay. And so everybody got a chance to talk about their own goals? Good. And how did you guys find the input from others? Some said supportive. What else? What other experience did you guys feel about that?
I was given very specific, my mind had a very specific
So now you have a very specific path you can follow. I'm just repeating it so everybody can hear. Because of the input that other people gave. Yeah. Did everybody come up with specific actions that they can do afterwards? So SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable. Yeah, it's not easy to do, especially when you're thinking about goals like, I want to be more client-centered. that can be, you know, so my goal is I'm going to go and be more client-centered. That's not very smart as a goal, so you need to be more specific, like I'm going to start asking a question, what's important to my clients? I'm going to use some examples that I heard around the room. I'm going to ask a specific question, and that's going to be part of my assessment. And so it's important to have those really specific, and you guys know this as OTs, right? When we set goals with our clients, the more specific it is, the more easy it is, the easier it is to measure it. How did you guys answer the question, what did your champion not do? So there's a couple of ways to look at that question. So I'm just curious.
Initially, I was reading that as what are the negative things that they do?
Mm-hmm.
But as I listened to discussion around the table, I thought, oh, there's also positive things they do not do.
Right.
That could also be taken out of that.
Yeah.
And then I put down a couple more comments for myself.
Yeah, so there's both, you can read that as being a negative thing, things that they're not doing, but also a very positive thing. They're not rushing. They're not, I don't know, over-prescribing, or they're not dominating conversations. So it can be very, very positive. Next thing we're going to talk about reflection in action. So what we've been doing so far is reflecting on action. We're thinking about what we have been doing. We're thinking about what we could be doing. We're going to start talking about reflection in action. And this, Dr. Seuss is one of the best life lessons people ever. Now there is a video clip. If you look this up or do a Google search, you can find this story being read out loud, but we didn't have an internet connection that we could use. So I'm going to read you guys a story, just a little Dr. Seuss story. I actually read it faster than the guy in the video anyway. So this is called I Can Read With My Eyes Shut by Dr. Seuss. And this was one that I didn't really know about. Have you guys heard this one before? Anyway, I came across it and I just loved it. So it says, I can read in red, I can read in blue. I can read in pickle color too. I can read in bed and in purple and in brown. I can read in a circle and upside down. I can read with my left eye, fish. I can read with my right, another fish. I can read Mississippi with my eyes shut tight. Mississippi, Indianapolis, and Hallelujah too. I can read them with my eyes shut. That's very hard to do. But it's bad for my hat and it makes my eyebrows get red hot. So reading with my eyes shut, I don't do an awful lot. And when I keep them open, I can read with much more speed. You have to be a speedy reader because there's so much to read. You can read about trees and bees and knees on trees and bees on threes. You can read about anchors and all about ants. You can read about ankles and crocodile pants. You can read about hoses and how to smell roses and what you should do about owls on noses. Young cat, if you keep your eyes open enough, oh, the stuff you'll learn, the most wonderful stuff. You'll learn about fish bones and wishbones. You'll learn about trombones too. You'll learn about Jake the pillow snake and all about Foo-Foo the snoo. You have to see that picture of Foo-Foo the snoo because he's pretty, I've never seen one like that. You can learn about ice, you can learn about mice, mice on ice and ice on mice. You can learn about the price of ice. Nice ice for sale, 10 cents a pail. You can learn about sad and glad and mad. There are so many things you can learn about, but you'll miss the best things if you keep your eyes shut. The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. You might learn a way to earn a few dollars, or how to make donuts or kangaroo collars. You can learn to read music and play a hut-zut, but if you keep your eyes open, but not with them shut. If you read with your eyes shut, you're likely to find that the place where you're going is far, far behind. So that's why I tell you to keep your eyes wide. Keep them wide open, at least on one side. To me, this is all about being aware, keeping your eyes open, what's going on around you. At least one eye, if you're really tired. But if we keep our eyes closed, we're not going to see what's going on. And that's what reflection in action is about, is keeping your eyes open. I love this book. It's my new favorite. So you can get the little video. So let's see how we're doing. Good. So we'll just start this part about the reflective practice cycle. And this will start to bring it full circle back to the, you've seen this cycle, and actually I put a big picture of it in this handbook just so that you can see it a little bit more clearly than in the little slide. So coming back to that reflective practice cycle, a quick review. We're going to do some planning, which we've been doing, right? We've been making plans. Tomorrow we're going to go back, or not tomorrow, Monday we're going to go back to work and start putting those plans into action. Then we're going to observe what it is that we've been doing while we're doing it. Hopefully we'll discuss it with some people and then reflect on it again. We have been reflecting on things that we did last week and the week before, last year, and we've been evaluating how we're doing it, how others are doing it. And then we come back to the plan again. So we keep going in a circle. What I'd like to try and do now is to talk about a method for approaching the self-assessment, because this is, you guys have all already done your self-assessment and you've identified your goals, and this, you may use parts of what we're going to go through just now, but it would be using, what I'd like to do is show you how I might use this reflective practice cycle to approach my my self-assessment, to determine what it is that I need to work on, for starters, and then to start working on those different objectives. So if we're going to base our assessment on those standards of practice, right? So when you go through, and I haven't seen what it actually looks like online. Some of these are pretty straightforward. Like the first standard of practice, there's not a whole lot of reflection involved in this. Be registered in the college. Check. Hopefully everybody's checked that one off already. There's no real reflection needed for that. But there are others that do. Demonstrate continued competence as required. There may be some. I'm not sure how you would measure that unless you show that you're doing courses or doing some reflection or doing some education, or somehow demonstrating your competence. So what I'd like for you to try, we're going to go in cycles around with this. If you haven't done this assessment before, then, or even if you have, you may go back and review it again. And so we'll do it in a cycle number one. We're going to look at this, and I would suggest that you look at the whole document. Look at the whole thing over. Read each of the objectives that are supposed to illustrate those standards of practice. Read all the notes around them, what they mean, and the examples, and if there are other examples. And just really quickly go through them and mark really quickly where you think you are on them, or if you have questions, you don't know what it means. I don't understand this one, or if you aren't sure if you're practicing it or not. So just make some real quick notes on it. So it's a fairly quick review of the whole document. So a big global picture of it. And so go through it again, mark what your initial thoughts are on how well you're doing each of these objectives. Some of them are going to be really easy, some will be a little bit harder. And pick out the ones that interest you from the harder ones. And then go away and leave it for a little while. So we'll still be on the first cycle. So leave it for a couple of weeks. And the activity of going through it and asking yourself those questions, you can take some of those questions and put them in the back of your head. And while you're going through your next couple of weeks, think about those questions that you had. So if one of your questions was about, I'm just going to pick one out here, grade and adapt occupations to facilitate progress. So I'm not sure if I'm actually doing that. So I'm going to put that in the back of my head and start observing if I'm doing it, if I'm not doing it. Start to notice if other people are doing it. If you're not sure what it means, ask other people. I was doing this, my self-assessment, and I'm not sure what this means. What do you think it means? And start getting some input that way. So we're going through that process of evaluating, observing, asking other people, getting feedback. Having coffee break discussions. We talked about there's lots of ways to have groups. You could have a mentor, you could have a manager, a friend. It could be another colleague in a different profession, or it could be somebody you're having a cup of coffee with at lunchtime. And then come back to the document, see if it makes more sense. And then you can reflect on that, readjust your marks for yourself, readjust your questions. But don't put too much time in any detail on that first cycle. So then, coming back to it again, going through it on a next cycle, I would, different people are going to do this differently. My suggestion is to take one section at a time, and you could be very methodical about this. Take section 1 and you go through it and, very specifically mark yourself. And if you're not perfect in each one of these things, then again, look at how could I be better. It may not matter that much, so you want to find something that's going to be relevant to you. So if there's nothing in the standard number 1, then move on to standard number 2. But we're going to go through that same cycle again. Look at each item, examine, think about it. Do I do this? Do I not do this? What evidence? How do I know that I do this particular or demonstrate this standard? And then rate yourself on each item. Make some notes to support your ratings. If you do have reflections already, put those in. And if there's any areas where you're not sure, then mark those in too. And then again, leave it for a couple of weeks. So you're going to put those ratings back in your back pocket, in the back of your mind. And then start again through that cycle. Look for evidence. How do I know that I'm doing these things? Catch yourself doing it. Catch yourself doing it really well or not doing it well. Or, if you've made a specific goal, which makes it easier to catch yourself, that, if you're going to start changing how you do your assessment, then it will be very clear that you're doing that while you're going through this next cycle. And notice what others are doing too. It's always good to just get outside your own mirror and look at what other people are doing. If you have other people to do that with. It's for me in private practice, I work mostly on my own. My colleagues all work on their own. And so I don't actually observe other OTs doing OT most of the time. But I can ask questions and I review other people's reports. So there are ways to do it. So again, asking questions of your colleagues, ask your mentors, having those coffee break discussions. Everybody goes for coffee, I sure hope, anyway. If we're too busy to do that, then that's a good excuse to do a little, you can call it my reflective practice time. 15 minutes in the morning and 15 in the afternoon. I'm a firm believer in breaks. I think we need breaks from what we're doing, and just to do your full stop and bring yourself back. I said here, use the peer feedback questionnaire. We use that in Nova Scotia. We've got a specific peer feedback questionnaire that we can give to our colleagues, and they give us feedback. And I know you guys don't do that, but you could make your own if you wanted to. And I think sometimes some different workplaces might have their own appraisals or peer feedbacks that you could use. So if you have something that you can hand to somebody and they can fill in and bring it back. And then look at that sort of champion. So do a little bit of reflection on it. Think about somebody who's doing it really well. How do you compare? go through that champions exercise. You can also do activities like, if this applies to your goal, is to go into, say, one session each day, and if my goal is to be an active listener, I'm going to go into a session with a client and I'm going to just ask questions and not tell anything for that entire session. And really focus on that and really be aware and be cognizant of it. You could take 5 minutes at the end of your day to take a look back, or some people might find it easier to take 10 or 15 minutes at the end of a week to look back over the week at what you've been doing, and then come back to the document and review and reassess that section again, and then go on to the next section. What I do is we do our peer assessment, which is very similar, or our self-assessment, which is similar to yours. We use the essential competencies, which is similar to what you guys do, but not exactly the same. And once I have my goals for the year, usually I've got 3 or 4. I go through my process usually at the beginning of the year. I get my peer feedback from one of my colleagues, and I set my goals. And the way I like to do it, this works for me in my life, is that I put it in my calendar on my phone, and it comes up at the end of every month. The last Friday of every month is review your competencies. It takes me 15 minutes. I open it up, see what my goals were. Am I doing this? Am I not doing it? What did I say? What did I say I was going to do? Oh, I said I was going to start going to business meetings with, this particular group, and I haven't been doing that, so I book that in. I find something to do. So it keeps me on track. So everybody's going to do it a little bit differently to find how to keep themselves on track with this sort of thing. Some people might want to do it every day for a couple of minutes. Some people might want to do it once a week. It depends on where you are too, and how intense and how immediate your goal is too. If my immediate goal is to learn more about driving assessments, then that might be something a little bit more in the forefront, and I could be checking on that every week instead of doing it once a month. Depends on your practice, how much time you have. But it really doesn't take a long time. It's just a matter of coming back, checking it, and putting it back in your mind. Because once it's in your mind, it'll stick there for a little while, and you'll be surprised at how things start coming up that you'll notice. Let's see, where are we? So using this, again, just going back, we've talked about a lot of this already. This process is dynamic, so you're going to move back and forth between the different stages of that cycle. You might go back to previous sections and jump ahead if you notice different things going on in your practice. You may actually abandon one goal and move to another, and just because it happens to come up as being more prominent at any given time. And some people might find it easier to take bigger or smaller parts. Some people might find it easier to take one objective at a time, just depending on your style and depending on how you carry out your practice. But it is important to complete all the parts of the cycle, so you need to talk to somebody about it. You need to check in with somebody else. And it can be hard to do that depending on your practice. If you're in a big department, you've got people around to start to talk to. But if you're a sole practitioner, anybody here working on their own? Yeah, there's a few people where you're out there on your own. You've got to go find people to talk to. And so sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge, and that could be one of your goals, is to find somebody, identify somebody to network with. And yeah, using that dialogue and that discussion is very critical. With this type of a process, with the reflective education, the reflective practice, no matter what level you're at, whether you're a student or been out working for a couple of years, or an old dinosaur like me, or some people have been out working longer, it doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're, and actually, it doesn't matter whether you're an OT or not. This works for everybody, right, Kirsten was doing her goals for, working in the office and supporting people. It will work for anything. You need to just identify your own goals, put it in your mind, and then actively go out and be thinking about it and thinking about what you're doing. And again, catching yourself, evaluating yourself as you go through your days. And then over time, you will notice how your practice changes. You'll start to notice that I am being more attentive, and it's getting easier to be attentive because I'm practicing it. Anything that everything takes practice. John McEnroe didn't learn how to serve a tennis ball by doing it 3 times. He did it a million times, and he's really good at it. He does it without thinking. That's what we need to do, is keep doing it and keep being aware of it. And he when he was learning, he had to hold his hand like this and his arm back. I don't know anything about tennis, but he was learning. Or actually, if anybody's learned how to play golf, the different, they tell you to do this and stick your bum out, move your arms back, and to try and think about all that, all those different parts, you have to be very aware of it at first, but then you do it over and over again. And I can't profess to be good at it, but the more you do it, the more you remember, and you start to rewire, and you start to learn to do it without thinking too much. But also be patient with yourself, because change takes time. It definitely takes time. So there is one more activity I want you to do. This is the SWOT, reflection in action. We're not actually going to be reflecting in action today because we're not being very action-ish. But this will help you to sort of start that process. It's a little bit of a shorter exercise that you can do. So choose a learning objective, whether it's the same one or a different one that you've identified. And then just go through these 5 questions. Over the past week, how well have I done this? And I've used that sort of COPM rating. Totally unable to do it. I'm totally able to do it. And then how satisfied am I with how well I'm doing? Because sometimes we may not be able to do something 100%, but I'm pretty happy with it. I can't play tennis very well, but I'm pretty happy with how I do it right now. And then give some examples that demonstrate why you gave yourself that rating. Sometimes it's helpful if you give yourself, say, a 6. This is another motivational interviewing technique. If you give yourself a 6, you say to yourself, okay, I gave myself a 6 on my ability to be client-centered. So that's not too bad. That's a little bit better than halfway. So why am I a 6 and not a 4? And that prompts you to start identifying the things that you are doing that makes you, that justifies that rating. So that's one way to look at it. And then just give it some examples of times when I didn't do it. And that's, again, looking at it from the other side. I've noticed other people doing it, so again, observing. And then specify, give yourself a very specific goal or objective of how you can learn more about it or improve this coming week. So do that real quick.